He called my cell phone 11 times. 11. And I was hooked up to a heart monitor the whole time. My daughter called once, just once, and stayed on the line until a nurse basically made her hang up. That right there? That's the difference between my two kids. He figured a guy recovering from heart surgery wouldn't notice where the money went. Yeah. That was his first mistake. Welcome to the revenge realm. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe before we get into it, because trust me, you're gonna want to see how this one ends. So, I'm 61, and the nurse hands me my phone with the screen still lit up. 11 missed calls, and not a single voicemail asking if I was even alive. My name's Earl Whitfield. 3 weeks before any of this happened, I had a stent put in my chest at Marion General, up in north central Ohio, same hospital where my wife Diane spent her last 11 days. I remember lying in that recovery bed, staring at the exact same ceiling tile I stared at 3 years earlier while she was upstairs dying, and thinking, well, isn't that something? Funny how the body remembers a room like that. I didn't know it yet, but somebody in my family was about to remind me. Some people don't remember anything at all. Let me back up a bit. Because you need to know what kind of man I was before you understand what kind of man I had to become. I own a hardware shop off Route 95 just outside Marion. Whitfield's Hardware. My dad opened it back in 1968. Sawdust and cut metal, that's the smell of my whole childhood. And it's still the first thing that hits me every morning when I unlock that door. Diane used to joke she never had to look up when I walked into a room. She'd catch that shop smell on my collar before she even heard the door open. 3 years ago, that smell was about the only normal thing left in my life. Diane passed that spring, ovarian cancer, fast and mean. And the last thing she said to me that actually made sense wasn't about her. It was about a wedding that hadn't even been planned yet. Whoever he is, she told me, holding my hand with whatever strength she had left. You make sure that girl gets the wedding she deserves, Earl. Promise me. Don't let money be the reason she settles for less than what she dreamed. I promised her. And the week after the funeral, before I'd even stopped crying in the shower every morning, I opened a savings account at Marion Trust and started dropping money into it. A little from every week's register close. A little from every slow season tax refund. 3 years of that, week after week, brick by brick, until it sat at $45,000. I never told a soul how much was in there. Not because I didn't trust my kids. Because somewhere along the way I learned, trust and access are two very different things. If you've ever had to keep a promise to somebody who's not around anymore to see you keep it, drop a like on this one before we go any further. Means more than you'd think. Diane and I had 2 kids. Sophie, 28, a vet tech over at the Marion County Animal Clinic, gentle in that quiet way that never once asked to be noticed. And Preston, 32, financial advisor at a firm 2 towns over, sharp suits, sharper opinions. The kind of guy who corrects your grammar at Thanksgiving dinner. Something was already cracking in that family long before any wedding got planned. I just didn't want to look at it. When Sophie was 10, she'd ride her bike to the shop after school and sit on a stool behind the counter doing homework while I ran the register. Preston, a couple years older, mostly stayed home with his video games, complaining the shop smelled like a garage. And hey, I never held that against him. Not everybody's built for sawdust. But Sophie? By 13, she was running that register herself, talking customers through wire gauges without missing a beat. She learned, I think, that showing up for people isn't something you announce. It's just something you do. I didn't know it back then, but I was watching the blueprint for exactly who she'd grow up to be. Sophie got engaged 14 months ago to a guy named Marcus. Quiet, good man, fixes HVAC systems, looks at my daughter like she hung the moon, shook my hand way too hard the day I met him and apologized for it. And I remember thinking, there it is. There's a man who's nervous because he actually cares what I think. Preston, meanwhile, he'd been unraveling in ways I only half understood. 8 months ago, he threw a chunk of savings into some crypto scheme a buddy pitched him over beers. Collapsed in about 6 weeks. He never told me the number. Didn't have to. I watched him trade his BMW for a used Accord and call it environmental. Then 5 months ago, I caught him with his hand in my actual cash register. Borrowing, he called it. $200. Promised he'd put it back by Friday. He didn't. That Friday night, I drove to Marion Trust and quietly opened a second account. Told myself it was nothing. Just an old man getting a little more careful with his money, that's all. Turns out I was more right than I wanted to be. I just didn't know how right yet. 3 weeks ago, my cardiologist found a blockage during a routine stress test and scheduled the stent procedure for that Thursday. I called Sophie first. She cried a little, pulled herself together, said she'd take 2 days off from the clinic to sit with me. Then I called Preston, mostly out of duty, honestly. He was in a meeting. "Dad, I'll call you tonight," he said, and hung up before I could even tell him which hospital. He never called that night. Texted the next morning instead. "Hope surgery goes okay. Crazy busy week." I sat there in a pre-op gown staring at that message way longer than any grown man should stare at a phone. Sophie sat with me through the whole thing. Held my hand right up until they wheeled me back. Same as she'd held her mother's hand 3 years before, in a different wing of that same building. And somewhere in that fog right before the anesthesia hit, I remember thinking, this is the one who shows up. This is the one Diane meant. I had no idea, lying there, that my other kid had already found the number to a bank account he thought was going to save him. The procedure went fine. Clean placement. No complications. Dr. Averill told me the next morning. And honestly, there was relief in his voice that told me he'd been more worried than he let on. I spent 2 nights in recovery, and on the second night, wires still taped to my chest. Preston finally showed up, not to see me, though. Nope. He came to ask me for something. He walked in smelling like the parking garage, still in his work clothes, tie loosened. Same look I'd seen on my own face the week his crypto thing collapsed. Desperate men have a specific posture, you know that? Shoulders forward, eyes moving too fast. "Dad, hey, glad you're okay." Said it fast, like it was a formality he needed out of the way. Then, "Listen, I need to ask you something, and I need you not to overreact. I just had a stent put in my chest, Preston. Overreacting's kind of off the table right now." He laughed. Too loud, the kind of laugh that's covering something. "It's about the wedding stuff. Sophie mentioned you've got money set aside for the venue and the caterer. I was thinking, since you're going to be laid up a few weeks, I could just handle the vendor payments for you. Take it off your plate. I do this professionally, Dad. Wire transfers, deposits, all of it. Let me help." Something in his voice didn't match his words. 30 years in business teaches you the sound of a man trying to act casual about money he wants badly. So, I told him, sure, sounds fine, and gave him the account number to that second account, the one I'd opened after the register thing. He didn't ask what was in it. And I sure didn't tell him. "Great," he said, already typing something into his phone before I'd even finished the sentence. "I'll handle everything. Don't even think about it. Just focus on healing." He left 12 minutes after he got there. Didn't ask about the surgery again. Didn't ask if I needed anything. 12 minutes, and most of it, he was looking at his phone. I lay there afterward, wires humming quietly on that monitor, thinking about the promise I made Diane. And I thought, not for the first time, that keeping a promise sometimes means protecting people from each other. Outside my window, the parking garage lights buzzed on one by one as the sky went dark, and somewhere down there was my son, already dialing a number he thought was about to change his life. Now, here's where it gets interesting. 2 days after I got home, still moving slow, still tender across the chest, my phone rang. Number I didn't recognize. Marion Trust's fraud department. "Mr. Whitfield, we're calling to verify an attempted transfer request on one of your accounts." A gentleman identifying himself with your authorized access code tried to initiate a wire transfer of $42,000 out of an account ending in 4471. It got flagged and held because the amount requested was way more than the account's actual balance. We need you to confirm. Was this authorized? Here's the crazy part. $42,000. Out of an account that had $1,200 in it. The one I'd opened 5 months earlier. The same week I caught him with his hand in my register, and never once told him what it actually was. A decoy. That's all it ever was. The real wedding fund, the one that actually held 45 grand, had been locked up in a beneficiary trust in Sophie's name since the week after Diane's funeral. He'd never touched it, never even known where to look. He just assumed the bigger number was sitting wherever I'd pointed him. 5 months of him never once asking a single question about that account, and it turns out the not asking was the whole story. No, I said. Quiet, careful. Watching a cardinal land on the fence Diane used to feed every winter. That wasn't authorized. Not by me. The woman on the phone, Renata, her name was, and I remember it because she was kind about it in a way that mattered that day. Explained the system flagged it because the amount didn't match the account's history. Their fraud protocols kick in an automatic hold whenever that happens. No exceptions, no matter who's initiating it. And the request had come from a mobile session, logged under Preston's name, since I'd added him as an authorized user 5 months earlier. 5 months. Same week I caught his hand in the register. I built that account as a test. Didn't even know exactly what I was testing for at the time. Now I did. He wasn't trying to help with the wedding. He was trying to empty an account he believed held his sister's entire future. 45 grand. 3 weeks after I had a stent put in my chest, using access I only gave him because I hoped, foolishly, that he'd changed. But here's what happened next. I called Larry O.C. that afternoon. Diane's cousin, closest thing I've got to a lawyer friend, semi-retired now, does estate paperwork out of a converted garage 2 streets over, told him everything. The decoy account, the real trust, the fraud call. He got quiet for a second. Earl, he finally said, you built yourself an evidence trail without even trying. That fraud flag, the timestamp, the authorized user log, that's not just proof he tried something. That's proof of intent, on paper, with a bank's own compliance department standing behind it. I don't want to ruin his life, Larry. I just want him to face what he actually did. Before he hung up, Larry added, quieter, Diane would have wanted Sophie protected, Earl, not punished. Protected. There's a difference, and you already know which side of that line you're standing on. I sat with that one for a long while after we hung up. I thought about calling Sophie that night, telling her everything. Didn't, though. Not yet. She had a cake tasting coming up in 4 days, a dress fitting in 6. And I wasn't about to dump her brother's failure on her before I understood the full shape of it myself. That night, after Larry's call, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, just the porch bulb glowing through the window, looking at that photo of Diane we keep by the toaster. The one from the county fair, her laughing at something out of frame. I could have used her telling me what to do next. She always figured things out faster than I did. Didn't call anybody else that night. Just sat with the picture a while and let the house be quiet. Now, if you've made it this far, you already know where this is going. But stick with me, because how it actually unfolds still surprised me. Drop a comment telling me which one of my kids you've already decided you don't trust. I'll tell you if you're right. So I spent the next week doing something I honestly hadn't expected to do. Nothing loud. I drove out to Ridgeline Manor, the venue Sophie and Marcus booked, and sat down with the event's coordinator, a woman named Priya who's clearly dealt with her share of nervous fathers. Paid off the remaining deposit in full, out of my own pocket, separate from either account, and asked her, quiet and plain, to flag any future contact from anyone claiming to be handling logistics straight back to me. No exceptions, no matter what name they gave. I didn't confront Preston. Didn't call him. Just let him sit in whatever silence a man sits in when he's waiting to find out if the theft he attempted got noticed. 5 days of dead silence from a guy who supposedly handled his sister's wedding logistics? That's its own kind of confession, if you think about it. It was Sophie who finally broke the silence. Not me, not him. Showed up at the shop on a Tuesday, still in her scrubs from the clinic, and I could tell from her face before she even said a word, something had rattled her. Dad, Priya from Ridgeline called me, said the balance is already paid, in full. I thought Preston was handling that. There it is, I hadn't told her yet, and the truth had already gone and found its own way to her. Sit down, sweetheart, I said, and for the first time since that fraud call, I told the whole thing, start to finish, out loud to another living person. She didn't cry right away, went very still, the same stillness her mother used to get right before saying something that mattered. He tried to take $42,000 out of my wedding fund, while you were in the hospital. Tried to take it out of an account that only ever had $1,200 in it, I told her. The real fund's never been touched. It's yours, Sophie. Always has been. I just wasn't about to trust the wrong hands with the real number. She sat with that a long minute, staring at a rack of pipe fittings behind my head, like they might have some kind of answer written on them. I don't want a scene at my wedding, Dad, she finally said, but I want him to know that I know. He will, I told her. That's not a scene. That's just the truth landing right where it's supposed to. If you've stuck with me this long, you already know a confrontation's coming, and it is. But not the way you'd expect from either of my kids. Hit like on this one if you've ever had to protect someone from a sibling instead of a stranger. That's a specific kind of tired nobody talks about enough. Preston finally called 8 days after that fraud flag hit, and I could tell right away. This wasn't an apology call. His voice had that clipped, wounded thing men get when they've privately decided they're the injured party here. Dad, I got a call from Marion Trust. Something about a hold on my authorized access, some fraud review thing. This is humiliating. You have any idea what this looks like at my firm? If compliance finds out I've got a fraud flag on my personal banking record, not one word about Sophie, not one word about the actual amount, straight to how it looked for him. I know exactly what it looks like, Preston, I said. I got the call first. Silence on the line. Then, careful, testing the water. Okay. So, you know it was a mistake, right? I must have mixed up which account number you gave me. I was trying to move some of my own money over as a wedding gift for Sophie, and I guess I just fat-fingered the amount. It's a clerical thing, Dad. Can you just call the bank and clear it up? $42,000. Called a wedding gift. Pulled from an account he never once bothered to check the balance on. During the exact week, he showed zero interest in whether I lived or died. I let that one sit in the air a second before I answered, because I wanted him to actually hear how it sounded coming back at him. Come by shop tomorrow evening, Preston. Sophie's gonna be there too. We're doing this the right way, face to face. He showed up the next evening, same work clothes, same nervous posture from the hospital room. Shoulders forward, jaw tight. Sophie was already there, sitting on an overturned paint bucket by the register, arms crossed, saying absolutely nothing. Dad, I already told you. It was a mistake with the account number. Preston. I kept my voice level. The way you talk to a spooked animal, not 'cause I was scared of him, but 'cause I needed him to actually hear me for once. The account you tried to pull 42 grand from had $1,200 in it. Always did. I set that account up 5 months ago. Same week I caught you taking money out of my register and calling it borrowing. His face ran through about 3 expressions in 2 seconds flat. Surprise, then something like calculating, then a kind of cornered anger. So what, you set a trap for me, your own son? I set a boundary, Preston. And you walked straight through it and tried to take more than I've ever once seen you honestly ask for in your whole life. This is insane. He turned toward Sophie now, hands out. Palms up, the universal move of a guy trying to get a room to see reason. Soph, come on. You know I wasn't actually gonna steal from your wedding. I've had a rough few months, that's all. I made a dumb mistake with a number. Dad's acting like I robbed a bank. Sophie didn't budge from that bucket. You tried to take my whole fund while Dad was in the hospital, Preston. Not while he was fine. While he had wires taped to his chest. 2 rounds of pushback, and he still hadn't managed one word of a real apology. Honestly, that told me more than the theft itself did. You have no idea the pressure I've been under, Preston said, voice climbing, that passive-aggressive calm finally cracking into something rawer. I've got obligations you two don't even know about. I needed that money to fix something, and I was gonna pay it back, every dime, before the wedding even happened. You're acting like this is some kind of unforgivable. You needed $42,000 to fix something, I said, cutting straight through him. Quiet. And instead of coming to me and telling me the truth about whatever mess you're in, you tried to quietly drain what you thought was your sister's wedding money while I was recovering from heart surgery. That's not pressure, son. That's a choice. And I need you to sit with that before you say another word. I gave it a second to land. The bank's fraud department's already got this on file. Time-stamped, documented. Tied to your name as the authorized user who initiated it. I'm not being vindictive here, Preston. This is just what happened. On paper, whether I say another word about it or not. His face went pale, the anger draining out fast, replaced by something a lot closer to fear. Are you saying you're gonna press charges? Dad, that would ruin me. My license, my job, everything. I'm not deciding anything tonight, I said. But I want you to sit with something. 3 weeks ago, you had a career, a fiancé who thought you were solid, and a family that still gave you the benefit of the doubt. Tonight you've got a fraud flag on a bank account, a sister who watched you try to steal from her wedding, and a father who just found out exactly how far you'd go when you thought nobody was looking. I watched something in him just deflate right there by the paint rack. Not remorse exactly. More like watching the version of himself he used to pretend to be finally walk out the door. He didn't apologize that night. Left just as tense as he'd arrived, still unresolved, muttering something about how none of us understood the position he was in. Same Preston, right to the end, still explaining himself instead of apologizing. A guy who talks all day about pressure and obligations and never once says the actual words, "I'm sorry, Sophie." 4 days later, he tried one more angle. Called Sophie directly this time, not me, and asked her, all sweet, like nothing had happened, if she could maybe talk to me about toning things down before it followed him to work. Told her it'd look better for both of them if the family just handled it quietly. No bank paperwork trail dragging anybody's name through anything. Sophie called me that night, laughing, but there wasn't a drop of humor in it. He wanted me to fix it for him, Dad. Same week he tried to steal from me, and now he wants me to smooth it over so it doesn't cost him his job. What? Did you tell him? Told him I hope the counseling helps. Then I hung up. Quiet for a beat. I used to think I had to earn being the good one. Turns out, I just had to keep showing up. He's the one who's got to earn all this. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just sat there with the phone warm against my ear, prouder of my daughter than I think I've ever let myself say out loud. And look, the consequences didn't take long to catch up with him, either. 2 weeks later, his firm's routine compliance review. Standard stuff for anyone handling client accounts. Flagged that fraud alert on his personal banking record. Put on unpaid leave, pending internal review. His fiancée, I heard through Sophie, started asking questions about some bank thing he wouldn't fully explain. By the time Sophie's wedding rolled around, that engagement had quietly ended too. He built that whole hole himself, one bad decision at a time. I sure didn't build it for him, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I gloated over any of that. Would have been easy to end this story feeling triumphant. That's honestly not what it felt like at all. A moment like that, you don't just jump straight from anger into satisfaction. There's a quiet stretch in between where you just feel tired and sad for the son you thought you raised right, and grateful, almost painfully so, for the daughter who never once asked you for a single thing. Sophie's wedding happened 5 weeks after that shop conversation, right on schedule, fully paid, not one vendor call disrupted. That morning, I stood in the little groom's party suite at Ridgeline in a rented tux that still smelled like plastic wrap, and Larry stopped by just to shake my hand before the ceremony. Diane would have had something to say about that tie, he told me, straightening it for me himself. And for a second, it genuinely felt like she was right there in the room, needling me the way she always did before anything important. I walked Sophie down that aisle with Priya standing off to the side, smiling like she'd been rooting for us the whole time. Marcus cried before Sophie even reached him, which honestly made me like the guy even more. Later, under the string lights, Sophie found me by the cake table, just leaned her head against my shoulder for a minute. Didn't say a word. Same way she used to when she was little and tired and didn't need words for it. Preston wasn't there. Sophie sent the invitation. Kindness, I'm not sure I'd have managed myself. But he never responded, and none of us pushed it. The real fund, sitting quiet and untouched that whole time in that trust, covered the entire wedding without a single dollar of strain. Enough left over, too, that Sophie and Marcus put a down payment on a little house 2 streets from the shop. Close enough I can hear her car pulling in some evenings. And even now, 3 years after losing Diane, that still catches me off guard, how much it feels like being a little less alone. Most Friday evenings, Sophie still stops by after her last appointment at the clinic, dog hair on her scrubs, and pulls up that same paint bucket like she never stopped. Last Friday, she brought me a coffee and asked if I still had that photo of Diane from the fair. Keep it by the register now instead of the toaster. She looked at it a long minute and said, she'd be proud of you, you know, not just for the money. For waiting, honestly? I didn't trust my voice enough to answer that one right away. If you've stuck with me all the way here, do me a favor. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. I put a new one of these up every week, and I'd hate for you to miss the next one. A few months after the wedding, I ran into Larry at the diner on Center Street. He asked how things had settled, told him about the house, about Sophie stopping by most Fridays now, about the quiet that had finally settled where all that tension used to sit. You ever hear from Preston? He asked. Once, text, back in the spring. Said he was doing some kind of financial counseling, trying to work through what he called some decisions. Told him I hoped that was true. Meant it, too. I don't know if he's changed. I hope he has. But hope's not the same thing as trust. And I learned that one the hard way, in a hospital bed with wires on my chest, listening to my own son ask me for account numbers instead of asking me how I was feeling. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. I still smell sawdust every morning when I unlock that shop door. Diane's fence out back still gets a cardinal most winters. And every time I watch Sophie pull into that driveway 2 streets over, safe, steady, married to a man who still shakes my hand too hard, I think about a promise I made a dying woman 3 years ago. And I think about how sometimes the only way to keep a promise is to build a second account nobody else knows about and just wait quietly and see who reaches for it.